Sounds more like one group trying to control another group. In other words, business as usual in America. Now, if you think you do have rights, one last assignment for you. Next time you're at the computer, get on the internet, go to Wikipedia. When you get to Wikipedia, in the search field for Wikipedia, I want you to type in Japanese Americans 1942, and you'll find out all about your precious fucking rights, okay? All right. You know about it. You know about it. Yeah. In 1942, there were 110,000 Japanese American citizens and good standing, law-abiding people who were thrown into internment camps simply because their parents were born in the wrong country. That's all they did wrong. They had no right to a lawyer, no right to a fair trial, no right to a jury of their peers, no right to due process of any kind. The only right they had, right this way, into the internment camps. Just when these American citizens needed their rights the most, their government took them away. And rights aren't rights if someone can take them away. They're privileges. That's all we've ever had in this country is a bill of temporary privileges. And if you read the news even badly, you know that every year the list gets shorter and shorter and shorter. You see how sooner or later? Yeah. Sooner or later, the people in this country are going to realize the government does not give a fuck about them. Government doesn't care about you or your children or your rights or your welfare or your safety. It simply doesn't give a fuck about you. It's interested in its own power. That's the only thing, keeping it and expanding it wherever possible.
As I see it, the fundamental value in relations among people is to respect the dignity and the individuality of fellow men. To treat your fellow man not as an object to be manipulated for your purpose, but to treat him as a person with his own values and his own rights, a person to be persuaded, not coerced, not forced, not bulldozed, not brainwashed. That seems to me to be a fundamental value in social relations. Whenever we depart from voluntary cooperation and try to do good by using force, the bad moral value of force triumphs over good intentions. And you realize this is highly relevant to what I am saying, because the essential notion of a capitalist society, which I'll come back to, is voluntary cooperation, voluntary exchange. The essential notion of a socialist society is fundamentally force. If the government is the master, if society is to be run from the center, what are you doing? You ultimately have to order people what to do. What is your ultimate sanction? Go back a ways. Take it on a milder level. Whenever you try to do good with somebody else's money, you are committed to using force. How can you do good with somebody else's money unless you first take it away from them? The only way you can take it away from them is by the threat of force. You have a policeman, a tax collector, who comes and takes it from them. This is carried much farther if you really have a socialist society. If you have an organization from the center, if you have supposed government bureaucrats running things, that can only ultimately rest on force. But whenever you resort to force, even to try to do good, you must not question people's motives. Maybe they're evil sometime, but look at the results of what they do. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Assume their motives are good. You know, there's an old saying about the road to hell being paved with good intentions. You have to look at the outcome. And whenever you use force, the bad moral value of force triumphs over good intentions. The reason is not only that famous aphorism of Lord Acton. You all know it, you've all heard it. Absolute power corrupts. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's the whole aphorism. That's one reason why trying to do good with methods that involve force lead to bad results. Because the people who set out with good intentions are themselves corrupted. And I may add, if they're not corrupted, they're replaced by people with bad intentions, who are more efficient at getting control of the use of force. But also, The fundamental reason is more profound. The most harm of all is done when power is in the hands of people who are absolutely persuaded of the purity of their instincts, and of the purity of their intentions. Thoreau says that philanthropy is a much overrated virtue. Sincerity is also a much overrated virtue. Heaven preserve us from the sincere reformer who knows what's good for you and by heaven is going to make you do it whether you like it or not. That's when you get the greatest harm done. I have no reason to doubt that Lenin was a man whose intentions were good. Maybe they weren't. But he was completely persuaded that he was right, and he was willing to use any methods at all for the ultimate good. Again, it's interesting to contrast the experience of Hitler versus Mussolini. Mussolini was much less of a danger to human rights because he was a hypocrite. Because he didn't really believe what he was saying. He was just in there for the game. He started out as a socialist. He turned to a fascist. He was willing to be bribed by whoever would bribe him the most. As a result, there were at least some protections against his arbitrary rule. But Hitler was a sincere fanatic. He believed in what he was doing, and he did far greater harm.
The U.S. government that incarcerates its own citizens, that has destroyed habeas corpus, that has upheld the Patriot Act, and this is Obama, right? This is the same dude, right, that has upheld the principles of torture, that blames low-ranking local sociopaths for the decisions of high-ranking sociopaths in the military-industrial complex through Abu Ghraib. This same genocidal, murderous, violent, sociopathic institution is clamored at by all the Greenpeace-type folks, all the tree huggers in the world, because they somehow imagine that this government, which has slaughtered 30 million people, is going to give a shit about some sea otters. Are you kidding me, people? It doesn't care about your fish. If it doesn't care about your children, and it doesn't care about the lives of Iraqis, and it doesn't care about the people getting gang-banged in prison, it's not going to care about your freaking shrimp. Can we at least understand that? This is not a place you go to for peaceful, permanent, long-term solutions. Nobody in the government is going to lose their job because they failed to provide correct oversight to this. Just as nobody at the SEC lost their job because Bernie Madoff pillaged all the savings of the old and the rich, and sometimes not so rich. The government instead, the people in the government who are responsible for the oversight of these oil rigs, are going to get more money and more power because it's a FUMU. Fudge up, move up. Fuck up, get more funding. That is the reality of the government. It's the entire reversal of any sane and rational perspective that you would have about how to solve problems. So please, please, please try to understand that the government doesn't care about the marshlands. And we know that because it doesn't care about the people it tortures and kills overseas. It doesn't care about the people it tortures and gets raped by stuffing them into human cages in the country. It doesn't care about the children that it's sold to China and other foreigners for the future. It doesn't care about you, and it doesn't care about your fish or your sea turtles or your squid or your octopus. It doesn't care. This is not where we go for rational, intelligent, sane solutions. It is where you go when you want to delude yourself that you're getting something done, when you want to grab the gun in the room and point it at the people that you think are doing wrong. The government has created the corporation. It has created the legal liability, legal inviolability to liability that is the corporation. And I say, hey, if that's the way we're going to play it as a society, if you can create a fictional entity, an imaginary friend that can take all the legal hits for you, no problem. I would suggest that everything that is good that comes out of my show accrues to me. Anything that is negative should go to this guy. This action figure is my new corporation, and if I go out and, drive my car over a bunch of cats and then get arrested, this guy goes to jail, goes to prison, and I am perfectly free, and then I can just go make a new one because I have a plastic vat of me in the back. And thank you for the listener who sent this in. It's a little trippy, but I appreciate the sentiment. So corporations are just complete madness, and they would never exist in a free market. It's a payoff. It's a payoff to the rich for accepting the state to give them immunity for these kinds of actions. So please, if you care about the environment, stop running to the state. It's complete madness.
Our government gives them.
Sir, it's worse than that. Project Shad, they've killed our troops
in test. I mean, but that's patriotic. Don't talk bad about the government killing our troops. Don't talk bad about the government giving black men syphilis. Don't talk about the government taking CPS kids for no reason. Don't talk about DynCorp running CPS in the U.S. now. Don't talk about it. It's not patriotic. You just have to let them do that for the troops. You don't support them. Put them in false wars. Let them get their arms and legs blown off. That's patriotic. It's sick. It's Pentagon brainwashing.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.